Good morning, everybody. My name is Jay Johnson. This is the sanctuary at St. John's in Royal, Illinois. Today we're going to be, I'll show you this bulletin cover. Today this is Epiphany 4, January 30th, 2022. This is Jesus talking with the woman at the well. We know the story fairly well. I'll return to this in just a few minutes. We've been speaking about the occasion of Epiphany, when Jesus, we know the idea of Epiphany is it's when Jesus allows himself to be seen as God. He comes into the picture. We've talked about this for the last, probably 5, 6, 7 weeks. Talks about the various ways in which Jesus is revealed. Started out when the first Epiphany is obviously when Jesus came as a baby. The angels were there, and the shepherds saw him. Okay, that was the first revealing where there was a manifestation of God come to earth. And then it was in the temple when he was dedicated. It was years later when he was in the temple as a 12-year-old. Then it was even years later when he began his ministry there at the River Jordan. Then he went up to the wedding in Cana, and even last week we were talking about how it became manifest. Jesus was known, and it was revealed himself to Nicodemus. And today we're talking about the woman at the well. It's a pretty powerful story. I'll jump right into it. The passage, it's found in John chapter 4. We just hit chapter 4. And I'll read this text to you. It's a great story, and it begins with Jesus has decided he must leave where he's at, and he needs to go to a place where he's going to have this encounter with this woman who will make literally the difference in the launch of his ministry on a greater scale. John chapter 4, beginning at verse 1. The Pharisees heard that Jesus was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John. When the Lord learned of this, he left Judea and he went at once back to Galilee. Now he had to go through Samaria, so he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Would you bring me a drink?" The woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." "Well," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with, but the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well and drank from it himself?" Jesus answered, "Anyone who drinks from this well will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water that I give will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give you will become in him like a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming back here to draw water." And he told her, change the topic. Seems odd, but he says, "Go, call your husband and come back." Verse 17 says, "I have no husband," she replied. And Jesus said, "You are right when you say you have no husband. In fact, you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is true." Verse 19. "Sir," the woman said, "I perceive that you are a prophet." And then she's a bit evasive, and she says, verse 20, "Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." Jesus replied, "Believe me, woman, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain or in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation comes from the Jews. Yet a time is coming, and is yet now come, when true believers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship him in spirit and in truth. The woman said, I know that the Messiah, when he comes, he will explain everything to us. Verse 26, Jesus says, I who speak to you am he. So he announces there that he's quite point blank. He says, I am the Messiah. Now let me backtrack through some. You've heard this, many of us have heard this story before. I want to show you how there's a slight progression. I'd like to make this comment that Jesus comes to address issues and problems, and he always comes and he knocks on the door. He knocks on the door because he knows he's willing to enter into your life, into your realm, into your space, and he's willing to make some of those comments that will cause you to not only have an awareness, but a freedom. Here's what she calls him at first. She says, you are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. There's the difference there because he's a Jewish man and she's a Samaritan woman. That seems a bit odd because for generations, I'm going to say probably maybe 4 or 5, let's see, maybe about 10 generations, they have been separated. They don't really care for each other. So she makes this strong statement, sort of pushing him away. You're a Jew, I'm a Samaritan, we don't get along. Jesus, not to be deterred by this, he says, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked me and he would have given you living water. Jesus doesn't take the pushback. He simply enters in and he approaches her. Now, I'll mention this because I think all of us, at one time or another, we have a tendency to take our own stance, our own position. We guard ourselves carefully, and we don't want anyone to encroach upon us, our position. We don't want to change. This woman now changes slightly. She called him in the last phrase, she called him Jew. Now she says, Sir, a little bit more respectful. Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where will you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself? You notice her rebuttal is, she says a little more respectful, but she asks him the question, how can you get this water? I mean, she's really confused because she has no idea what he's talking about. But her defense is, this is our territory, this is our place, this is Jacob's well, you can't access to it. She says, this is really interesting, she says the well is deep. The well, in fact, I didn't know this until just this past week. The well, in fact, is about 75 feet deep. That's a deep well. If you've ever stood outside this church here in Royal, the bell tower is I think it's about 52 feet to the top. So 75 feet would be another half the church height above that, which means it's a deep well. 75 feet is a long way. And the whole idea is you have to lower a bucket down into that well, get the water, and pull it back up. Jesus has no rope, no bucket, so she's thinking, I don't think you could do this. And Jesus says this, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty, but whoever drinks the water I have will never thirst again. Indeed, the water I will give will become like him water, a spring of water welling up into eternal life. Now, when he says that there will be this water within her, that reveals thirst. She's thinking of physical water. She's thinking, yeah, I'm always thirsty. Now, I would indulge you to think about that. Are you thirsty? What is it that you, whoever you are that watches this, what are you thirsty for? What do you want what is the thirst that needs to be satisfied in you? So she says, Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to come here to draw water. Very good point. What can I have to satisfy the thirst that I always have? Now, you and I and everybody you know always has a thirst for something that needs to be filled. Obviously, we talk about water, but there's things more complicated than just physical thirst of water. So she asked that question, and then he completely goes off. Now, she says in this question, the well is deep. The well is deep. So Jesus turns right around and he goes with a question that's deep. He talks about this thirst that's within. And she says, I want this particular thirst satisfied. And so he comes and he goes a completely different way that she would never have expected. And Jesus says, go call your husband and come back. Where'd that come from? Go call your husband? Because he knows what her thirst is. He knows what she's longing for. And then she says, I have no husband. And Jesus already knows, and he says, that's right, you don't have a husband. You've had 5 husbands. In fact, the man you're with now, he's not even your husband. Now think about that phrase. We've heard that statement made time and time and time again. When this woman hears that, what is the impact of that statement on her heart, on her life, right then? Now, we know that there's no one else around. There's no one else there to hear this discussion. I've just read through this passage here, not very quickly, not really slow, but the whole passage took less than probably 3 minutes to read. And John reports this passage in this letter. He reports that passage, he reports that incident in this letter. So here's my question. When Jesus says you've had 5 husbands, but even the man you're with now, he's not your husband. So there's been at least 6 relationships in this woman's life. There is an exposure of a tremendous thirst that's going on in her life. Why do I say that? It doesn't take a genius to figure out if you've had 5 husbands, something's not been right. Not been right for her, not been right for them. And when a divorce occurs and when there's a separation, there's got to be a level of pain that goes deep, really deep. Inside, covered up, protected. I'm not talking about that. Now, you've heard messages about this before. I want to focus for just a minute on this. What are those things? What are those deep hurts that we experience? Imagine that you're that woman, maybe not that particular woman, but if Jesus asked you what's hurting you, what would it take for you to listen to what his question is, and what would it take for you to be able to share how deep your hurts are? Well, we know that Jesus can do that. And whatever it is, this woman is going through that process right now. Why do I say that? Because as we read at the end, she reveals something that's very powerful. Let me continue. He asked this woman to please go find her husband. She says she has none. Jesus says you have 5. The man you're with now is not your husband. Then she says in the next phrase, she doesn't call him sir, she calls him prophet. I can see that you are a prophet. Now, her respect for him is building. Now she sees that he knows things. But still she's on the defensive. And then she immediately goes to this phrase, our fathers worship on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. Now, the Jews and the Samaritans are divided on that point. And Jesus declares, believe me, woman, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. He hits her with a double statement here that sort of maybe shocks her. He says, a time is coming when you will worship the Father. He announces that God is Father. The Samaritans would never have thought that, and neither would the Jews, because they would not have addressed the Almighty as Father. But yet that's what Jesus says. And he discounts the point that it's not going to be in this place, nor in Jerusalem, but it's going to be wherever truth and spirit can be declared. He says this, yet a time is coming, and now has come, when true believers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth. To be more defensive, she steps back and she makes this statement. She says, I know that Messiah is coming, and when he comes, he will explain everything to us. She has just mentioned the phrase Messiah. Messiah will come. And Jesus, he hands out this very soft, very powerful, and yet gently offers this phrase. He says, the one who's speaking to you right now, that's me. I am the Messiah. Now she's listening. What do you think she's going to think? What's going to go through her mind? Again, I'll mention the fact, I don't know how long they spoke. I think it was much longer than just the few seconds it takes to read this. I've been speaking to you for about 15 minutes now. I think it was much longer than that. Why do I say that? Because we know his disciples had walked into town, and Sychar was probably about, the well, Jacob's well, was about a mile and a half outside of Sychar. So they had to walk a mile and a half into town and a mile and a half back out. They had to go into town, do some shopping, find the stuff, probably encounter some opposition because they're Jews and the Samaritans didn't like them there. We don't know how long this journey took. I'm going to say it could have taken a couple of hours. I don't know. But certainly a lot longer than simply the time it takes me to read this. If they sprinted into town and they sprinted back and they had good times for the mile. This was about a 3-mile run. They couldn't have made it back in, if they were really good, they could have made it back in maybe 20 minutes in that day. I believe it was much longer. And I say that because in the process, there was this discussion here that truly swayed her. Let me continue. Jesus said, I who speak to you am he. Next verse says, just then the disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking to the woman. No one asked, what do you want, or why are you talking to her? Now listen to this. Then, leaving her water jar, the woman went back to town and said to people, quote, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Christ? You just heard the discussion. This woman said, he told me everything I ever did. He's told me everything I ever did. All the key events of her life, all the key facts, data, and information about her life, Jesus already knew. How quickly did that come out? Let me back up for just a second. Remember back in John chapter 1, verse 39, Andrew and James, they met with Jesus in a few short hours. They talked with him and they knew that he was the Christ. I think the only way that can happen, remember earlier I said that Jesus comes in the front door? He comes in the front door, he presents himself, he knocks on the door, and he's allowed to come in and speak with them, and he sits and talks with them. And he spoke with this woman, and all of a sudden, she now knows that he is the one. This is what happens. She said, could this be the Christ? She left her jar there, and she said to the people in town, come and see. He has told me everything I have done. Could this be the Christ? They came out of the town and made their way towards him. Many of the Samaritans from that town believed him because of the woman's testimony. And because of his words, many became believers. They said to the woman, this is the clinch. They said to the woman, we no longer believe just because of what you said. Now we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this man really is the Savior of the world. You see what we just covered very quickly? I want to show you something here. This is the cover on the bulletin. Okay, we talk about this whole thing about what's transpired here. You see this little line here? This is the scheme of what happened there at Sychar. You see at the bottom? You see that little bottom place right there? That's Jacob's well. He had to walk into town. In a nutshell, this is what happened. The woman said, this mountain, Mount Gerizim, Mount Ebal, it was 1,000 years, probably 1,500 years before, God sent Joshua and all the Jewish people to meet together between those two hills, between Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. And they were to give praise and honor to God. While they were there, the Lord told Joshua, they would have this exchange between all the people there. It was like, you know, when you go to a U of I game, they go I-L-L, I and I, and they shout back and forth between the two mountains. That's exactly what happened. And they made a covenant. Those people there on that day, in that time, in the time of Joshua, they made a covenant. And right there, in that place, the covenant was made. And so in that place at Sychar, also called Shechem, it says in the book of Joshua, chapter 30, I think, it says that the covenant was made. The covenant was made right there in the middle, and that's why the Samaritans would always go there and they said, on this mountain we worship. Of all the places in that nation, the one place where Jesus chose to go back and to make his ministry officially begin in the public, to officially begin in a big way with this woman, was with people that did not accept the Jews. So I'll simply finish by saying this. Jesus comes to the door and he knocks. He comes to us. Now take a look at this. You know, you've seen this before. We've seen this image before. Anybody that comes to church here on a Sunday morning sees this. It's an incredibly powerful image because Jesus is knocking at the door. And that door is not just at Sychar, it's at every human's heart. It's at your heart and mine. He's waiting for you and I to open the door and allow him to come in. Why? Just for a chat, just to sit down. And you know what? If you allow him to talk to you and you talk to him, he's very quickly going to convince you by means of his Spirit that he can handle any and every difficulty that you face. It's true. We'll be talking more about that. Next week we'll have even yet another story about how Jesus reveals himself so that people recognize the divinity that he offers to us. Thank you so much for taking the time to come. It's good to see you. It's always an honor to talk about Christ. But even more so than that, it's always an honor to listen to what he has to speak to our hearts. And he does that by means of his Spirit. Take care. Bye now. See you next week. Okay? See you in church? Okay.